Hey guys, I'm SIPPY.
My name's Wyatt Troy.
And welcome to Behind the DAW.
We interview artists and music industry experts on an emotional, philosophical, and artistic level to get inside their heads, gather the best information, and then bring it back to you. By the way, this is a companion podcast to our new YouTube series, In the DAW, where we invite artists to dissect their songs in real time. If you have any artists you would like to see come on the show, or if you have any feedback in general, you can contact me at wyatt@musicandstuffllc.com.
Speak in an American accent? Like, is that a real thing?
I can, the more I talk to someone who's American, slowly I can slip it in. Like, how would you say, hey? I don't know how to say this is SIPPY. I don't know how to say SIPPY American. SIPPY. And you're listening to Behind the DAW. Behind the DAW. That's how you say it. Behind the door. Behind the DAW.
The DAW.
We just say door. Oh. It sounds like a door, but DAW. I don't know.
Okay, so to start you off, I have 3 deep questions that are probably funny-ish, but it just kind of gets your mind going. So when 2 people are eating at home, it's really awkward to eat 2 different things. But when you're out and you're going out to eat, why is it okay to eat 2 different things and it would actually be awkward to eat the same thing?
I have never thought about that, but that is actually could be a very deep and philosophical question. To be honest, I actually think there's no problems with eating 2 different meals at home, but I think there's a laziness factor. It's we have to literally prepare 2 different meals. That is so inconvenient. I just want to come home and eat and go to bed. I don't want to mess around with this whole you're eating meat, you're vegan, let's, organize some, 2 different meals. No, it's just the convenience factor is let's just eat the same thing because it's just easy. But you're right about when you go out and if you both get the same meal, everyone, I'm the same. If I see someone order something that I wanted, I'm oh, now I can't get it. That's so awkward. But I think it's because when you go out, everyone, well, I don't know, me personally, you kind of want to try everything on the menu almost. So you kind of figure if the person next to you gets something different, you have the opportunity to be oh, I'll just have a taste, that kind of, or at least you hope that they're going to be like that. If they're not open to that, you're man, come on. I would have ordered the same thing had I known you're not going to share.
Is that a common thing in Australia? Everyone just kind of knows to share their meals?
I don't think it is, but I think out of courtesy, everyone kind of just offers. If you say, oh, that looks so good. Oh, do you want to try some? It's just kind of common courtesy, gotcha. I guess. Maybe not. Maybe it's just the people I know.
I think in the States, we're very territorial about our food. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I probably agree with that. It's yeah, cool, thanks. It does look good and I'm enjoying it. You can just keep watching me enjoy this.
Question number 2 is arguably, okay, so there's a preface to this question. So the first preface is, arguably the brain is the most important organ of the body, correct? Okay. How do we know that though? Because our brains are the one who's telling us that. What if there's actually another organ that's... Man,
we're going right down in the rabbit hole here. So random little backstory. I went to university. At uni, I did exercise and sports science, or it was a Bachelor of Applied Science. But it meant that I was doing things like biochemistry, biology, biomechanics, all this kind of stuff. And we had to do neuroscience. My teachers just hated me because the thing so we did psychology and neuroscience. And the thing is neuroscience is very much the science behind the connections, the synapses, the whole, all the neurotransmitters and all that sort of thing. Obviously, psychology is very different. It's the way of thinking and conscious thought and all that stuff. What I totally didn't understand and constantly questioned my lecturers about was how does a bunch of chemical reactions turn into conscious thought? And they were well, we don't know. Don't ask us this question. You're either in neuroscience or you're in psychology. You're not in both. It's one or the other. But I totally see that question in terms of how do we know? Because it's our minds. I think that about everything. How do we know that's a computer? How do we know that's a frog?
Is there a frog on the wall?
I don't know where frogs.
Does that happen in Australia a lot? They're just frogs walking across the wall.
Actually, I just went up to Queensland and that is how it is. Frogs
Really?
just like jumping around everywhere. You're like, oh,
Along the same vein of thought, do you ever watch Vsauce? Do you know what that is?
Vsauce? No.
An amazing YouTube channel. Just like, if you like questions like this, it's just, that is good. So on one of the questions it's he was talking about the last Thursday theory, which the last Thursday theory states, how do you know the entire universe didn't come into existence last Thursday? And of course, the common answers are like, well, we have memories past that, or we have evidence past that. It's like, how do you know that didn't just form last Thursday? How do you know, Laura?
What? My mind just like imploded as you. So the theory is like my memory doesn't go past last Thursday.
Theory is, how do you know that your memories weren't just created last Thursday, but the memories say that it goes clear back?
Some Black Mirror stuff. I kind of love that stuff, but then like you get to a point where you're like, oh, this is weird. Let's stop talking about it. Let's do something really mundane and normal to like get ourselves out of it. I feel like I need to like ask other people this when I first meet them, being like, all right, let's iron some things out.
Okay, I got one. You know what natural selection is, right?
Yes.
Okay. For those who are listening who don't know what natural selection is, so like in terms of like, you know, animals or humans or whatever, the animals or the humans or the creatures or whatever with the strongest traits are the ones that keep going because they survive the longest. And so if they survive, they mate, pass on their genes, so on and so forth. If natural selection is true, then every time you and I or anyone else in the world kills a spider, we're technically killing off the weak ones and we're making a super race of spiders. Is that correct?
I come from a place where there are a lot of spiders. I'm almost an expert in this field. I'm a little bit of a hippie. Well, I'm actually not a hippie, but people kind of say that I am in terms of like, I get really funny about like squishing bugs like that. And I think also here in Australia, we have a different reaction to spiders because on the one hand, you're like, the spider freak me out. But on the other hand, you know that most of them aren't going to hurt you. Most of them are actually, the big scary ones are actually the friendly ones who aren't going to bite you. They're not going to hurt you. And if anything, they get rid of all the other bugs and all the mosquitoes and the things that actually like are annoying and actually like kind of hurt you a little bit. So in terms of like the whole squishing spider theory, I don't think that if you came across 5 spiders, I don't really think that the fastest or the strongest one would necessarily get away because it's like, I mean, they're quick, but like I don't think there's like a big difference. But I think in that situation, okay, say for example, I had 5 spiders in front of me and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to squish them. I think it would almost be luck because the 5th one's going to get away because I'm busy squashing the other ones. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's just like flipping the theory on its head.
What's the biggest spider you've seen?
Ooh, I've had quite a few like interesting interactions with spiders.
Like, do you wake up to them crawling on you?
One is probably the size of my hand. I mean, I have like smaller hands than a normal person, but the size of my hand is probably, it's called a huntsman spider and they're quite common. You see them, I mean, you don't see them all the time. Like I live in areas where like there are a lot of bugs and spiders and animals and things like that. But yeah, usually the size of my hand, but they're the ones that are like the nice ones. Like they just sit in a corner and they're like, I'm just here to eat the mosquitoes. I'll leave you alone. Don't worry about me. I'm not going to jump on you. Like, but they're the ones I catch and release because it's like an animal. I don't know how to explain it. They're the ones that you're like, oh, you're big enough for me to recognize as like a living thing. So I'm going to catch you and release you. Kind of thing. Not that they aren't all, but like also they're not like they're not going to hurt you. So you kind of just catch them and let them go. But yeah, that's probably the biggest one I've seen. But I've had I once put my pants on and there was a spider in there. I've like fallen asleep with like spiders like above my head. Just things like that. I know things like that happen.
What?
But they're not the ones that hurt you. So they're like kind of all right. The scary ones there's a couple of different scary ones that you kind of like don't mess with. And I've only seen one of those in real life and I live in where the spiders live, if you know what I mean. Like so many Americans are like, I'm not going to Australia because there's spiders and things that can kill you and all this stuff. I'm like, I have lived in the spider infested areas my whole life and I've seen one the whole time. So it's like the ones that want to kill you stay as far away from you. Sorry, they don't want to kill you, but the ones that can kill you stay as far away from you as they can because they're scared and they're like, I just want to live my life and please leave me alone.
Living in Utah, you've been to the States, right?
Yeah.
Have you been to Utah? It's a desert. Like it's desert, like proper desert. Like spiders here are like black widows, brown recluses, hobo spiders, things that you have to go to the hospital after you get bit and hopefully you get to keep a limb. I guess that's just what the hobo spider spider. So like to think about letting a spider live.
Yeah, but the spiders, like the ones that are going to kill me, may they rest in peace. But the ones going to kill me, I do not let them live, unfortunately. And no, there's no natural selection. They're not fast enough to get away. I'm just like, I gotcha. Oh. Actually, usually I don't actually kill them because I feel uncomfortable. So I'll just trap it and then I go, someone else deal with that.
Do you have scorpions?
No, we don't have scorpions. We have snakes, but not scorpions.
Do you have sand puppies? Do you have sand puppies?
What is sand puppy?
Yeah, exactly. So sand puppy is like if you took a spider, like the creepiest spider you could think about and the creepiest scorpion that you think about, and like they fought and like there's just like a bunch of limbs and everywhere, and then some scientists came together and made it into a bug. That's what it is.
That's scary.
It's terrifying.
It's the thing. It's the people from like in LA who are like, oh my gosh, there's all these things that can kill you in Australia. I'm like, mate, they don't want to come anywhere near you. They're not just like making their life about coming after you. And there are so many more things that can kill you in LA than there are in Australia. Like
gangsters?
Well, realistically anyway. Crazy people are a lot more dangerous than spiders.
So now that we got you warmed up, we have Laura, also known as SIPPY, here today. Crazy stoked for this. How are you doing today, by the way? I guess I didn't ask you that.
I am very good. Today is a good day.
And the very first question that I have for you, SIPPY, is this. If I was to ask you one question in this entire interview and you're like, yes, I'm super glad he asked that question, what would that question be?
I mean, I guess the question I always like is sort of not where I've come from, but like, how did I get to this point? Because I just find it, I know it's a super broad question, but it's kind of, it pretty much gives a huge insight into how I've gotten from where I started to here. And I think a lot of questions and experience can kind of like stem off that. Mm-hmm, so I know that's super broad, but.
Okay. So here's a question for you. How did you get to where you are now?
So longhand, shorthand kind of thing. I guess I'll sort of put it into like a brief summary. But pretty much how did I get to, go full-time into music production? I guess starting way back as a kid, I've always been into playing instruments. I played piano from super young age. I probably started about 7 or something. And from the very start, I just loved making my own little melodies and, just playing along. Obviously, nothing was structured in terms of songwriting. I just was like, oh, like I'm just going to make up my own songs. I was always really passionate about that sort of thing. And when I got into high school, so around 12, 13 kind of age, I then picked up a guitar and started teaching myself to play the guitar. I also started playing drums. And
wait, hold up. You go to high school at 12 or 13?
Yeah, high school. So we do primary school is kindergarten, which is the year before grade 1 up until year 6. So that's about 5 years old until 12. And then high school is 12 years old till 18.
So you go to high school for 6 years?
Yeah, it's just, we only have we have primary school and high school. We don't have a middle school or anything like that.
Whoa. Okay. Keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, so I started playing drums, which were like sort of my main instrument all through high school. I loved it. I pretty much my parents wouldn't let me have a drum kit. So if I wanted to practice, I had to go into school early every morning and get in there and practice. Even by the time I got better, like the only way I was allowed a drum kit is I traded a basketball hoop for a drum kit and like just kind of like tried to get my hands on it. Even when I had it, my parents were like, you can't play it when we're here. Like, not that they were being discouraging, but I was pretty bad at the start. So
sounds like a really expensive basketball hoop.
Yeah, right? I was like, you really want the basketball? Okay. Because all parents want to get rid of drum kits. Their kids take up drums for like 6 months and then they never play it again. And then there's this awkward, uncomfortable thing in the middle of the room that the parents are like, get rid of it. Yeah. Very into that. And then at the end of high school, like I did music all through high school and I was doing a lot of composition, but the composition was more with orchestras and brass bands. And, I was in a couple of bands that I kind of made with people just writing pop songs or writing more orchestral songs or writing big band brass tracks and things. Sometimes I would work with 25, different instrumentalists with strings and trombones and trumpets. It was all very live sort of stuff, very much not in the computer at all, unless I was recording with a microphone and turning it into an MP3, but it was very much live. And then I left school and I assumed if you weren't the best at whatever instrument you were playing, then there was no career for you. And I didn't really think I was a very good composer. I loved it, but or songwriter, I just thought I loved doing it and it was good fun, but I didn't think I was the best, which in my mind was what I needed to be in order to make a career in music. So went to uni and did Bachelor of Applied Science in Exercise and Sports Science, completely unrelated. 3 years, great degree, got through it. And and never did anything with it. But I learned a lot, which is good. But in that time, I missed music so much. And I asked someone if they could teach me. I had started hearing producers. Like this was when Flume was really starting to take off. And that's when it really kind of clicked. I don't know why with him specifically, but it clicked. Oh, he's made all of this whole song inside his computer. Like, and that's it. He didn't need a guitarist there, or he didn't need, all these people. That kind of made me go, oh, that'll be fun. If I learn to produce, I can just do it for fun, open up my computer wherever I am. I don't need, other people or anything like that. So I asked someone to teach me. But of course, I wasn't really into electronic music. So when they sat down to teach me, they were like, you have no idea what's going on. Like, this is like impossible to teach you this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I kind of have no idea what's going on. So he told me to go into a DJ competition, which we have over here in Australia called Your Shot. And pretty much the theory behind it is they teach you how to DJ, and then you all play at this big event and you compete. And teaching me to DJ just really taught me about electronic music, taught me the structure, and really sort of, it actually taught me a lot. And it also sort of got me into that tech world. Yeah, I know CDJs aren't as extensive as, production software, but it was just sort of getting me in the right headspace. So I went in the competition, had a great time, didn't win or anything, but got a residency from there at Chinese Laundry, which is one of the most reputable clubs over here. And I was playing always from day one. My passion was bass music. I was really into dubstep, glitch hop, drum and bass, trap, all of that kind of stuff. Really just heavy bass stuff that was kind of my thing. So I just started DJing for fun. I was still at uni, so I was just going for it and just having fun. And it just kind of kept rolling and rolling. I worked pretty hard at it. I would take any gig that came my way. I would sit in the corner and play 5 hours to like a empty bar, just anything to give me some experience at that point, which was awesome. And I definitely think that really helped me a lot, because my skills became so developed because I didn't put aside the time to practice. I would take the gigs that were 5 hours because it forces you to practice under pressure as well. So then from there, I was about to finish my uni degree and I was working at a bar and it was closing down. I was living at home. I had all this money saved up and I was like, well, I can either go get another bar job for 6 months, or I can just go out and look for experience in the, in the music industry just to see what it's all about, the kind of back end sort of stuff. So I approached this guy that I knew through the Your Shot competition called Sam, and Sam Korotkov. And I said, look, I just want to learn. Can I just come in? I'll work for free. I'll help you out with whatever you need. I just want to learn. And at the time, he was the manager for Tiger Lily and a couple of other artists. And he also was running Your Shot as well. So I came in, I worked for him probably 3-4 days max and just threw everything into it. I was just like, it was once every week or every 2 weeks, and anything he said, I just went all out and I loved it and I was just so excited and passionate. Anyway, after only that month or so, he said, hey, I want to bring you in to talk to myself and someone else called Steve Pillemer, who was working with Your Shot at the time. We've sort of got a proposition for you. And pretty much they came to me and said, we're looking to open up a DJ school to train all of the Your Shot contestants, and you're passionate, you're excited, and we think you can do a really good job for it. And so pretty much they were fronting, they were like the investors, and I just they said, we want a DJ school. Well, they want 3 DJ schools, one in Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, and you just go for it. So at 21, I finished uni, went straight into it, had no experience, had no idea what I was doing. And I just went, I got to build some DJ schools. Like, let's do this. Built it that year and I learned so much. I pretty much built a business from nothing and with no one else, because Steve ended up moving over to the States to do Your Shot USA. Sam went off and was doing other work. He wasn't doing Your Shot anymore. So literally at 21, I just went, all right, I'm talking to real estate agents. I had builders, I had trainers, teachers. I'm flying interstate every week. It was just like chaos. And so in those, so we were running it. I was working there for 8 months. We were sort of in the middle of it for 6 months, and we trained for 3 months. And in 3 months, we trained 700 people, which was pretty full on. And I was teaching classes and running the schools. And it was it was awesome. I learned so much. And then after that, I actually went over to the States. I met a DJ producer, Bear Grylls, who, we became great friends. We just got on really well. And he just kind of said, look, he saw me play and he was like, I didn't really have the big picture in mind. I was just doing whatever I could do. And he said, look, come over to the States and see what it's about, because bass music here is, it's got a bit of a following, but it's nothing like the States. The States, there's just so many people. So I went over and watched some of his shows, watched Excision play, watched Prototype, like a whole heap of people. And I just saw what it was and just went, wow. Like part of me was like, wow, this is massive. But part of me was like, wow, I could do this. Like I could, and not, I could do this, be on stage. Well, I mean, I love performing and playing, but more like I can grind, I can write music, I can really get in here and be a part of it. I pretty much came back, applied for Icon Collective straight away. They like, I saw how much it was. I was doing it online, saw how much it was. I was like, I don't start working until March. I have this much money saved up. If I just sit at home and don't do anything, I'll be able to pay those first 3 months. Then 80% of my salary will go to Icon. And then hopefully I will have saved up the other 20% to pay the last 3 months. I didn't even think about any of that stuff. I didn't think about money. I didn't think about how much time I had. I just went, I have to do this. This is the most important thing for me right now. And so I started it. The first 3 months were like, I felt like I knew nothing. Like, sure, I knew about songwriting, things like that, but music production, I had no idea. I knew how to use Ableton, but that was about it. And so I just went to every class. And because it's based in LA, I'm waking up at 3 a.m. to go to office hours, and I'm doing my mentor sessions, and I'm just going crazy. You have to hand in a lot of assignments because they have to prove that you're doing the work. So I'm just going for it. And then the school start up. So I'm working 7 days a week with the school because on the weekends we travel interstate to run events and all that sort of stuff. And we'll work from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. on those weekends. So what I would do is I would wake up at about 3:30 in the morning, do my work, go to the event that we're running, go from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m., work from 11 p.m. until I fall asleep, which was usually like 12:30, 1 o'clock, sleep for 2 or so hours, wake up, do it. Like it was like chaos. It's like I even remember at one event, I had half an hour between, I'd gotten my work done so quickly and we were starting something in half an hour, ran into a back storeroom, got my laptop out, started recording vocals for something. I had a jacket over my head as like a little vocal booth and was just like singing this little jingle. So it was an intense time. I was probably normal night, like good amount of sleep would be just 5 hours a night. But I mean, I had one weekend where we were doing the events and I realized over 5 days I'd only slept 8 hours. It was just like,
my gosh,
go, like get it done. But luckily, I probably had 5 months of the year, split between the beginning and end that weren't that chaotic. But I just knew, I was like, I need to do this. I have to get through it. And I remember right in the middle of the year when I was going through all this, I wasn't sleeping or anything. I found out that both my grandma and my uncle had terminal cancer, and my grandma passed away during all this. So I'm going from looking after her, going to the hospital, doing all this sort of stuff. And it was just, and I had to get through it. My teachers were being, super supportive, but they were also like, you got to push, you got to get through this. And it was insane. And I think that really taught me how to really just pump out music. Like I know it sounds insensitive in terms of the creative world, but it just taught me how to really get the job done and really pump out music. And then the next year I kept working at the school and was just working on finishing songs. And I released a couple of tracks, probably about 6 tracks over the year from about March, April last year, and which was really awesome. It really, got me into finishing my tracks. And then more recently, I met someone over here. His name's Naderi. He's quite well known along the producers, but found out he lived not far from me, and we sort of connected over Twitter. We had a couple of mutual friends, and we just hung out a little bit. Started working on a track together, and pretty much he gave me a massive opportunity. He said, come in, I'll start teaching you things. I just pretty much went in there and was like, I'll help you with anything, because I just figured I'm going to learn and I'm just going to absorb everything. So at first it was more, I was just coming in to help him with anything, whether it was mundane things like bouncing stems, or whether it was helping with writing melodies, or, doing some sound design or whatever. I was just in there sort of interning and just working. Yeah. And then eventually we kind of made it a little bit more structured and a bit more serious. And now he's come on he's come on essentially as my development manager. So he's said, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to teach you everything, in terms of improving my production, and then also helping me along with the SIPPY project to really develop me into an artist that can really write some cool stuff. And in there, I'm also doing a lot of mix downs for people, mix down and mastering, and, doing productions for pop singers and things like that, which is amazing experience as well.
Was the first time that you quote unquote heard about Naderi, was that during the Icon Q&A?
I'd actually heard about him before the Icon Q&A. Okay. And I remember during his Q&A, again, it was LA time, so I had to wake up at some ridiculous hour and I was sitting in my bed watching the Icon Q&A on my phone. And I remember typing in all these like little questions like while I was sitting there.
I remember being in that Q&A with you because I was an online student as well at the time. I think you asked a question about the Serum sub bass or something like that. Was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
You? I thought it was a legit question and he told me.
Yeah, you should see every day. Like, you know, I ask questions. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, no. But it's funny because the questions I do ask, like, I've come to realize that where I came from. So, like, I learned a lot of my production through dubs. I've had so many amazing producers, and like, not to get into the gender stuff, but I've had a lot of male producers who have been super supportive, super helpful, and have taught me a lot of things. But a lot of them are in the dubstep realm. And there was almost like, and this is not, you know, a blanket rule, but there are a lot of them that are very much almost like paint by numbers in terms of creating, well, not creating as much, but more with mixing and sort of sound design and that kind of thing. And so I came from this realm where it was like, oh, your kick and your snare have to hit at -8 dB and then you mix everything to that. And Sean, the thing that he kind of taught me when I first came in, he was like, it sounds good. You know, if it sounds, don't worry about the rules, don't worry about the numbers. You know, does it sound good? Does it not sound good? And he's almost the opposite. He just goes in and rips in and he changes things as if it's no big deal. Me asking those questions, you know, like he's so the opposite. He's like, nah, you know, do this sounds cool, you know, like, and but in saying that, he's not rules based. He's not like, this is how you have to do it if it sounds cool. And that's why he keeps developing, because when I first came in, like, I was a nobody. I'd been writing music for a year and a half, and I would go, oh, like, I think it'd be cool if you do this. And he goes, oh my gosh. And he listens and he goes for it. You know, he doesn't have the ego that goes, well, I've been here longer than you, I know what I'm doing. You know, he very much just pulls out everything. And it's definitely a different way to be. And it means that you really create things, you know, when you're not stuck in those rules.
When you were talking about that, you said that, you know, the majority of the male producers that you've worked with have been very kind to you, have been very respectful, and I'm really happy to hear that. I sent over the podcast that I did with Laura Brem, and we talked about you in there. And so with you being a woman in the electronic field, this is inevitable that I was going to ask you this question and about this concept. So, I mean, you said, you know, for the majority, they have treated you very, very well. The males in the industry have. I mean, has there been times when people haven't because you are a woman?
I said the majority, but I mean, I say it as in the majority of the people that I have built relationships with, if that makes sense. There are plenty of, I mean, like anything, you know, there's plenty of, you know, I see it. I see the discrimination, all that stuff. But the important thing for me is, like, I never fixate on that, because it becomes impossible to move on. And you yourself become so jaded by things like that you literally can't continue to move on and continue to grow. I definitely see it. But the thing that's awesome, and I have said this to so many people, and I've sort of reflected on it, is, you know, I always say, like, wow, I'm so lucky to be surrounded by so many, and I don't really have a lot of interactions with female producers, purely just I haven't come across them. Not because I don't, obviously it's not because I don't want to, but I just haven't, you know, we haven't crossed paths. But in terms of the male producers I've come across, I have said, like, I'm so lucky to, you know, have such amazing people surrounding me. And what people have said is, well, it's not luck. You know, it's not like I haven't stumbled across people who aren't like that, but I obviously subconsciously have surrounded myself with those kind of people. And, you know, if someone doesn't treat me like that straight off, I go, no worries. Like, it's nice to meet you. We won't be friends. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, we're not going to have interactions because there's not really, neither of us are going to get anything out of it. You're obviously not going to get what you want out of it, and it's going to be nothing to me. But I've definitely experienced it. But, you know, I also experienced positive things by being a female in the industry. Like, people remember me purely because I was the only girl in the room talking about, you know, isotope trash. You know what I mean? Like, you know, there's credit in that too. And I obviously want females to be empowered to go out and work in the industry, but then they, like anyone, need to work hard as well. And I think there's been a lot of awareness around it. I definitely have a lot of males in the industry who have just, like, really supported me from day one. Dr. Werewolf, Adam Forster, he lives over here. He pretty much mentored me from day one. Everything from DJing, he saw me first start producing when I was absolutely terrible. And he's been there every step of the way. And then people like Graham, Phase One, who used to live over there and now he lives in LA, and I'm really sad. But he's always had an open ear. He's always been awesome about it. And then people like Tizoki, you know, there's all these amazingly talented producers who have always been there to teach me, critique, you know, show me new tricks and all that stuff, especially when at the start, when I had no idea and I was really struggling. You know, now it's a little different because at least I know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? At the start, I was almost like, this is all going way over my head. But it is, I've definitely had the support there, and they're the people that I choose to, you know, surround myself with. And I will experience discrimination. I've felt it, to be honest, more in Australia than I have over in the States. I find more industry-wise, you know, I've experienced it in terms of gigs and opportunities that are often not given to women because it's almost like people don't take them seriously. And it is disheartening. I've had even people who are close to me or working on my team that you know, have done things like that. But at the end of the day, I get the reinforcement by working hard and producing, you know, doing good things. And the people above that recognize that, you know what I mean? And I'm in it for the long haul. I'm not here, you know, short term, hey, if I post naked photos on Instagram, I'll get more followers, which means I'm going to get more bookings. Like, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the longevity, and I'm going to be writing music for the rest of my life. And I can now because I've put in the hard work to learn. And now that's a real, you know, that's what my life is going to be. And I can't be happier for that.
Like, I'm really happy to hear amongst the, you know, the smaller percentage of producers that are females, you know, you and the other Laura that I've talked to. And that's even funny that like the two producers I know are both named Laura. Neither of you have actually had like a really big like crowning moment. It's like, this is what happened because I was a woman and freaking this guy messed up my career because XYZ. But no, like
everyone does. I've had the moments where I've come home just so upset and crying or whatever and thinking, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world because of this has happened. But that's not what makes the career, you know, like, and it, at the time you're like, oh, this sucks. But you know, like it's not what makes the career. And I don't, you know, when people do ask me that question, I'll acknowledge it. You know, I'm not going to try and be like, oh yeah, there's, you know, everything's equal and whatever. But I'm also not about let's crush other people so that it can be equal. You know, we have to work towards that. And people like Sean are helping that happen because Sean's bringing someone like me into his, you know, what he's doing. And it means that when, you know, say for example, a mixdown comes in and that, you know, some big artists need changes, they need critique and whatever, and he puts them onto me, like that's saying, hey, this girl can do anything I can do, you know, and I trust her with everything. And it's little things like that will slowly, you know, we can't change this overnight, that are slowly going to develop the industry to become more even and to become more about, you know, the ability, not about are you a girl, are you a guy, you know, and this whole like gender.
I think that's amazing that you have such a good attitude about it. And what is the deepest thought you've had in the last year?
Oh, mate, that's down the rabbit hole. Deepest thought. I'm not trying, like, I can't remember specifically like certain things, but like I do have, and like maybe this is getting deep. I don't usually like, I tell this to friends, but I don't really talk to people about it much. But well, I at least don't like, not promote it, but I try not to like dump it on people. But like I have definitely experienced a lot of anxiety over the past like 4 years. Quite severely too, but I've always underplayed it, and I think I still do in my mind. I'm like, oh, it's not a big deal, but meanwhile, I'm like literally sitting in the corner of my shower thinking I'm gonna die, and I'm like, it's not a big deal, like, you know, whatever. Like, you know, I always kind of just like brush it off and just like kind of move on and try and do the things that you try to do to sort of, I'm not going to say get rid of it, but you know, like try and cope with it and try and make it better and all that sort of stuff. But I think with that, I get, you know, my mind starts to get into really deep stuff, and I also have this weird mentality that I can slip into where I become almost like, it's so hard to describe. I remember like I've been having it since I was a young kid, like probably like 6 or 7 years old. And I remember trying to tell my mum that at that age. And I mean, still at now I can't even describe it, but it's like a mentality of becoming fully, like almost coming out of the superficial conscious thought and really going deep into it almost feels like I've gone like inside even further, and I'm kind of looking out at, it's not an out of body experience. It's almost like the opposite, where I'm kind of fully conscious of, I am a human being, but what am I? What is life? You know, like it's real. It's so hard to describe it.
I know the feeling though.
Yeah, it's really weird, and it's almost, I almost like freak out. I've become like better at dealing with it now, but I almost freak out a little because it's almost like my brain needs a distraction from it. It's like my brain's like, oh, I need to talk to someone to feel normal, if you know what I mean. But it's almost like this thing that goes on in my head that just, it's like your whole existence sort of spins around on itself, and you go, oh my gosh, like I'm a I don't know how to describe it other than I'm a human being, and like I'm going to die, and what happens after I die, and like what is the conscious thought in my head, you know, like connected to this body. Like it's a really strange sort of feeling, and it is that kind of deep thought where I almost can't describe it. I've learned as I've gotten older to like sort of just let that happen, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I mean, you can distract yourself, which I also sometimes do, but it's literally like a strange feeling of just, it's almost becoming so consciously aware of yourself, but in a different way to usual, you know. It's almost like you've cut out all distractions and you're just kind of like sitting in your own head, and it's really bizarre. I mean, if anyone else ever has that experience and you want to like, you have a good way of explaining it, please tell me, because like still, like I remember when I was a kid and I remember my mum saying, don't worry, it's just a phase, because I would freak out, and my mum was like, don't worry, it's just a phase, you know, you'll grow out of it. And I sort of didn't think about it again until I got a lot older, and it happened again. I was like, oh my gosh, like, and it's different when you're older, and it comes about because, you know, you can kind of deal with those things a little bit differently. But yeah, it's super deep. It's very like, yeah, I wouldn't say a fixation with death, but like more recently that has sort of, for whatever reason, maybe things that have happened in my life, or I've gotten a little bit older, and, you know, just thinking about all of us pass away, and what happens to us, and what happens to our conscious thought, and what, you know, what happens to our energy, like all that stuff. I find I can get really deep into thought about it. I had to sort of pull myself out of it a few times because I started to get like too deep about it, if you know what I mean.
So you said two things there. So the one is about like the being like hyper conscious of you. And I remember having that as a kid too. Like I was in 4th grade at an English class reading a book, and it just hit me out of nowhere, and I like started to freak out. And
yeah, when you're a kid, you really like,
yeah, you almost like, it's weird. It's like, this is my hand, but wait,
that's literally it. Yeah. Like it's like your conscious thought is on the inside, and your body's just kind of like moving around, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
People are probably listening to this and being like, you guys are crazy. Like, what are you talking?
Yeah, I remember like having one of those thoughts, right? And it's like, my name is Wyatt. Like that is how other humans know me. And
you're literally explaining it like how I think about it, but I also, it's hard to like get it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like seeing your reflection when you're in that mind state, and you're like, this is how people perceive me. Like
it's mind blowing. And then you're like, yeah, my name is Laura, but am I really Laura?
Yeah.
You know, like,
am I just controlling this body? You know what I mean? Like you ever see the one Disney movie, what's it called? Inside Out. You know what I'm talking about? Where they control the mind.
So the first time I watched that, I was on a flight. I think I was going to LA or something. And the girl next to me was watching it, and she had subtitles on. I literally sat and watched the whole movie, no headphones. And I started crying next to her. And I was like, she looked over at me, and I was like, just been watching this whole movie and reading it, and now I'm crying. Like, it's like the whole time I wasn't watching anything. I could have just put on my screen.
In that vein of thought, relating to the other thought that I had when you were talking. So like when you're talking about like what happens after death and everything, like basically we have like 2 categories ish, right? Up to this day and age of like what happens after death. There's like the religious side of it, and then there's like the scientific part of it. I mean, kind of, you know what I mean? So the scientific part is you're dead. That's it. You know what I mean? Maybe your energy gets passed on into, you know, your molecules get passed on somehow, but whatever. You're dead. Yeah, that's it. And then the religious side is that, you know, there's more.
An afterlife, or there's heaven, or you get reincarnated.
Exactly. And so this is interesting, like, because at the very beginning of the conversation, you said something about a simulation. And it's interesting because I never really thought about this before, but the religious view of it is technically just
a simulation,
right?
It's
a very eloquent way of saying a simulation, right? Is that your spirit is in your body, and then when you die, you leave the body. So you're technically, man, that is weird.
It is. It's a simulation. You know, if you go for the whole Christian or Catholic Christian thing, it's God runs the simulation kind of thing, and it is. I don't know. In terms of that stuff, like I was raised Catholic. And as a kid, I was very much like, it was good peace of mind for me to be like, it's almost a good way to explain it so that it's not so scary, if you know what I mean, like about how people die. And it is actually like, for me, it was a good way to deal with death, like it was a little bit easier. As I got older, obviously, I got into high school and I started to question all these things, the whole like the sex before marriage stuff and, all that sort of, don't eat meat on Good Friday and all that sort of stuff. And I was starting to learn a lot about other religions. So, I was learning about Islam and Judaism and Buddhism and, and there were things I could take from every religion that I was like, wow, that's really, insightful. There's things in every religion that I find really interesting and really, really cool. More in the spirituality sense. After I left school, I was very, not lost, but, I was just like, I'm starting to just put together what I am. And I think of it more as a spirituality sense rather than religion, because it just sort of puts my mind at ease. But I very much became fixated with death and what happens. And it was so dire and scary to me that we die and it's darkness and you're alone. And, I just found that so scary. I did talk to a few, I've talked to many, it comes up in conversation, you talk to people about it. And I remember talking to this one lady who was talking to me about the whole energy thing, because she was trying to sort of console me a bit, because she could see I was just like, this is crazy. And, I'm not like, well, I don't think there's one guy up there that says you live, you die. And I don't think there's 18 gods. And I just kind of I think I was looking more from a scientific point of view. The whole energy thing really struck a chord with me, because I did learn, at uni, energy, you can't just get rid of energy. It doesn't just disappear. It's always transferred into something new. And I think that's what really put me at ease, that, your, however you want to describe it, your consciousness, your soul, your, whatever it is that helps us to make conscious decisions and be aware of what's happening. That energy can't just disappear. You know what I mean? It's got to go somewhere. And whether it's in conscious thought form or something else, I still am not sure, and no one really is. But it's that transfer of energy that I've really sort of focused on. And not that doesn't give me any more, like it doesn't tell me any more, but it just sort of gives me this sort of, thought of the energy moves to something. Yeah. And that kind of gives me it just makes me relax about the whole thing. And you know what? Everyone always says, oh, well, we all die and every person dies. I'm like, yeah, but what if it's horrible for every single person? Like, we can't come back and tell each other like dying is bad and it sucks, and blah, blah. Like we don't know. But the transfer of energy is really what I sort of cling to a little bit. And I'm always finding my spirituality. I think my spirituality is more in lifestyle and, family and friends and surrounding yourself with good people and looking after yourself and things like that. I know that sounds really random, but, and I am a bit of a hippie. I like to be nice to people and I like to be nice to the animals and the earth. And, I'm not full on hippie, but it's more just, I like to be nice and kind to people because it makes me feel good, Yeah. And I don't want to, fester more chaos. And I want other people to feel good about themselves as well. I know that's a random tangent, but I think very much like the whole circle of death was very much, well, not circle of death. That cycle is very much, I've been thinking more about transfer of energy more than anything else.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And so is what you just explained, is that your current spiritual beliefs?
Yeah. I mean, I've sort of pulled myself out. I think I was thinking too deeply about it and I was getting so overwhelmed with it. Whereas now I'm like, I've sort of said, okay, it's a transfer of energy. One thing that I did miss, so my grandma passed away 2 years ago, and my whole family were in the room as she sort of went from conscious to unconscious to pass away. And I actually missed that very moment. Killed me. I hated that. And I thought, and I know this, I didn't need to see her. We said the things we needed to say before she passed away. So I had no problem, and she didn't need me there or anything like that. But the thing that I found interesting was as soon as I walked in the door and saw her face, I knew. And it's weird because the body's the body. She was already unconscious. It's not like she had a heart monitor up to her and I could hear a flatline or anything like that. She was just laying there as she had been the whole time. But just by looking for, and I know that's probably more of a physical thing, but just by looking for her, I knew that energy wasn't there anymore. which is like a really sort of bizarre thought. But I think for me, as a sort of coming to terms with experience, maybe seeing that changeover could have given me even more insight into the whole transfer of energy. But I mean, look, I'm open-minded. That's where I'm at the moment, that, I think about the energy's got to go somewhere. I don't know where it is, and I don't really mind where it is. I just know that the energy's got to go somewhere. But, I'm sure I'll hear plenty more theories. And
you explained a concept that I too have found a lot of solace in, quote unquote. I would deem myself as a rather spiritual individual, but I feel like too often, we were even talking about this earlier, about the two sides, like the scientific and the spiritual. And I think there's this misnomer that they have to exist independently of each other. And I don't think that's true. I don't even think it's a Venn diagram. I think they're the same thing. We're just using different words to describe things. For example, a Mormon belief. So I'm Mormon in Utah. There's lots of Mormons. Another term is LDS is what we call ourselves. So a lot of Mormons, we have this belief. It's called eternal families. When people get married, in the thing, it says you are husband and wife until death do you part. Or some religions believe, no, once marriage does not carry on past death, so on and so forth. So, but we believe that, if you're married here, you're going to be married
forever. That's real forever.
That's forever. That is not till the end of life. That is eternity. And so it's the same with, like, we believe that our sons, our daughters will be our kids forever. Parents will be parents forever, so on and so forth. And so, so that's a spiritual belief. And then, I started looking around, scientifically, quote unquote, about that. And I was like, is it just a belief? I mean, is there any evidence of it in, normal life? And to my own experience, I say yes, because you explained it. You actually explained it very, very well. Is that like when you were saying that, like, there just can't be an end after death, like you can't just come to a stop. And so that was one of the things that kind of resonated with me, is that, like, we resist endings so much, but why? Why do we resist endings? And so maybe that's a part of it, is that it's just something embedded inside of us, that we resist endings, and maybe it's symbolic of eternal families or something like that. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Also, I can't fathom the fact that you could fall in love with someone so much, whether it's a wife or a husband or your kids or anyone, that you can love these people so deeply, and then when you die, it's done. It's done. It's completely done. No more. It just stops right there. I can't fathom that. I can't fathom that we spend so much energy and so much time and so much feelings that when we die, it's done. No more.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean. But also the thing is, it's different. It's almost like, and this is something that my grandma said before she passed away. We found out, so she had cancer, and it was probably a year from when she found out to when she passed away. And, they did treatments and things like that. And she had this final appointment where they pretty much said, there's nothing more that we can do, and, all that sort of stuff. She was out walking with my dad after the thing, and they were just sort of talking, and she goes, this is going to be a lot harder for you guys than it is for me, because that's the thing. When she goes, and in the theory, she dies, she's gone, she doesn't exist. But for us, we're the ones that carry on the feelings, the thoughts, the memories. It's us that really hold on to that eternal love, because once she's gone, we don't really think about what, who knows, she might consciously not exist and not be able to think about that sort of stuff. But for us, that's still very real for us. And that love continues no matter how long she's gone, until we continue. And then the next generation and so on and so forth. Random side note, but something I find really interesting is, have you ever heard of those kids who, from when they can talk, tell their parents about how they came through a tunnel and that's how they got here?
I do.
Have you ever heard of that? That's the mind-blowing stuff.
I do.
And it comes from such a young age where it's like they can't be taught that. And kids, there's this whole theory with kids where, they forget, they go through phases and they forget about things. But if they carry it on for years and years and years, that's how you know that it's a real, it's a real thing essentially. And that's these kids who say these things to the parents, and the parents have no idea. They're like, where have you gotten this from? We've never lived in Scotland. And then they go back to Scotland and there's some link, and you're like, it's all just one giant black hole that's going through time, and it's some interstellar thing. And like, you know what I mean? That's a random side note. But I also find that sort of stuff really interesting.
And it reminded me of something. So when you were saying that your grandma said it's harder, the hardest part is for you guys. For me, I die, I go on. That's kind of the easier part. And I guess this isn't necessarily pertaining to death. It's more so a phrase that I heard one time that was a deep thought. We all have heard the phrase, I would die for you. People say that all the time. Oh, I would die for you. But that's actually, as noble as it is to say that, that's kind of not the noblest thing to say, because dying is easy. To die for someone is very easy. What's hard is to live for someone, to live every day and to make every single decision based around a certain person's happiness.
100%. It is hard, and it's pulling out of not being selfish. And sometimes people can justify it because they feel good for doing it. They go, people might do something. They're like, oh, I'm going to do this for this person because it'll make that person feel good, which is going to make me feel good, sort of thing. Yeah. But there are so many situations where it's not about that. I have, say, for example, cousins with disabilities who, seeing my aunties and uncles look after them. They live for them. They live to give them a quality of life. Mm-hmm. And they essentially, and this is going to sound, this isn't actually how it is, but it's almost like they're giving up their life for them, to serve them, to give them the quality of life. And it is very much that I'm living for you. And I think you're right. It's almost easy to die for someone, you know what exactly. I mean? Because it's there, it's done. It's not every day I'm doing everything for you and I live it out and all of that sort of stuff. Exactly. Yeah, that is interesting theory.
You mentioned that, so, tying into this conversation that we're having, you mentioned that do you still struggle with anxiety, or you had anxiety?
I do, but I've very much come to I don't know if control's a word. It's almost like I feel like I'm getting rid of it. Like I know that it like doesn't work like that. Like I still have bouts of anxiety, but compared to what it was, it's so much better. And I just went through so many I tried everything. I just went, and I never went to a doctor who was like, you have, anxiety. I realized it on my own when I thought I had to go to hospital because I thought my lung was collapsed or something like that. And then I woke up the next day and I felt fine. That's when I realized this isn't a physical thing. Like your brain is telling your body things, from all of this. And I eventually, at first I thought, oh, okay, now I realize it's all in my head. It'll go away. Like, I know it exists. Now it's gone. It so didn't work like that. I knew what was going on and I still was like, why isn't it stopping? So I literally tried everything. I tried, I went and saw like psychiatrists. I went and started exercising all the time. I started meditating. I started, doing all these things. And eventually I came up with a combination that really helped. And whilst I don't think I'm all the way back to where I was before all of this stuff, and to be honest, like realistically, like before all this, I wasn't an adult. So the things I worried about were different, things matter more than they did. But in saying that, I've definitely can get back to, something that's a lot more
solid ground, so to say.
Yeah. It still definitely exists. I'm not going to pretend that it's not there, but definitely the way I've dealt with it and where it's come to now is a lot more, is a lot better.
I'm really, really happy to hear that, because I feel for you. I really do, because I've struggled with anxiety for 15 years, ever since I was a kid. The reason why I asked that and I brought that up is because when we were talking about, it's easy to die for someone, it's hard to live for someone. When I was going through some of like my hardest mental times with anxiety and depression, the idea of suicide and dying in general, it seemed like a sweet release. Like it seemed like, because it is the easy way out, right? That is what it is. We can't even pretend to understand what people go through when they commit suicide, what they're going through or what's going on. It would be crude to even think of, to even pretend that we know what they're going through. But at the same time, suicide is kind of the easy way out, because you're calling it quits. You know what I mean? You're pulling the lifeline, so to say.
Yeah, definitely. I was always very self-aware as a young kid, and I never had any experience with any form of mental health issues. As I was growing up, as I was a teenager, I didn't have the eating disorders. I didn't have depression. I kind of had a pretty, and I say in my mind, I had a pretty cruisy childhood. Like everything was I say in my head, it was easy. Essentially, I didn't have too many issues. And as I started to go through this anxiety, obviously I learned a lot about mental health. And I know anxiety is a new buzzword, and it's, the whole like white girl's response to mental health or something, you know what I mean? But, and like, I don't ever, I try not to preach to people on social media about these things, but I love to, if anyone comes to me to talk about things, like I love talking about it, because, even if what my experience doesn't, isn't the same as someone else's, little bits and pieces can help everyone. And if any words can help people, that's the important thing. But I noticed when my anxiety was really bad, all I wanted to do, and I still to this day, so, I've never suffered from depression or any other form of mental illness. But I remember when my anxiety was really bad and all I wanted to do every day was go upstairs, go to my bed and sleep, because if I slept, I wouldn't have to deal with these issues, you know? And at the time, I didn't think anything of it except for how good is sleep, because it's a relief. I don't have to worry about, I'm not anxious. I'm not stressing out. I remember I would go through I would have these, bouts of anxiety and just go, I need to lie down, and would just fall asleep because one, I'm so exhausted from it, but two, it means it'll go away. And then after the fact, I realized that's a pretty dire thought to have. I would rather sleep and be unconscious than deal with this sort of stuff. Yeah. And it is a real thing. And again, like I never think of I would never want to, or in my mentality, I don't ever want to take my life. And, I'm very much, I like to work hard and I like to fight. And in my head, anxiety is horrible, but it's a challenge and I need to get through it. And it's not something to, I guess, give up on, which obviously, as you said, people who commit suicide, I'm not even going to begin to understand. I know how dire it must be in their heads. And it is true that it's that kind of relief from your own head and what's going on. Having that anxiety, to be honest, as much as I would love to always be carefree and always feel like a kid and think like a kid, I've learnt a lot from that, and about other people, about myself, and just about life in general. And it's taken me to, places. It's taken me to, personally, emotionally, psychologically, to like really, really low places. But the amount I've learnt from that is insane. And I don't think I would be the same person without learning from those experiences.
In those anxiety states, I mean, what has been kind of the darker moments of your life? When was your rock bottom, and so to say?
I probably have a couple of times. I remember the first time that the anxiety was so real that it almost took me to hospital. And that was when I finally realized what it was. But I also didn't realize at that point that a lot of the symptoms, or going on from that a lot of the symptoms were anxiety. I can't tell you the amount of times I went to the doctor being like, I had heart scans, I had, my gut checked, like all this stuff. And it's all, flow on symptoms from, what do they call it? Like not long-term anxiety, but, not just the little random bouts of anxiety. Like,
chronic anxiety,
chronic anxiety. Yeah. Not like an acute, situation. It was from more chronic anxiety. And I eventually worked it out because I literally one day just Googled, what are the symptoms of anxiety? Or, what are the signs and symptoms? And it was like 12 of the 15 had been things I'd experienced. And that put me at ease too. But probably the darkest moments, besides, originally working it out, I probably have two or three. One was that day where I woke up, and I would always wake up feeling great and being like, oh my gosh, I don't have anxiety. I feel good now, which means it's all in my head and everything's good. And I remember only 45 minutes later walking upstairs and getting into bed and just going, if I go to sleep, it'll go away again. You know what I mean? And that was definitely one. Another one, actually, this was the same experience. I remember I was having a shower, just sitting there. I find showers like time to think. It just came over me like a massive wave and a very dire. My anxiety was very much, I had a fixation. It wasn't a social anxiety or anything like that. It's a fixation on death and dying. Maybe because one, I feel like I have so much left to do. Also, I've seen a lot of young people more recently pass away. And also I had an incident where I went to hospital for a while, and at the time I was totally fine with it, but maybe delayed onset, I've realized that life is quite fragile. Anyway, so I was in the shower and it just came over me, and it got to the point where I was like, I am going to fall over and die right here. Like this was very much like tunnel vision. I had to like hold onto the wall and like sit down, and I was just completely freaking out, and no one was at home, which is the best thing for me in terms of when I get really anxious. And I know this isn't the good long-term thing, but if I have someone to talk to, my brain's distracted and it doesn't go into its, my brain kind of overthinks everything, as I'm sure everyone's does, but, it gets me into this role of thinking about, this is, I have a sore this, maybe it's, maybe I'm dying, or, like I know that sounds really silly, but
I see what you're saying, though.
That's kind of what it rolls into. And no one was home, and I just go, what am I going to do? I pretty much got out of the shower still with soap in my hair and was like, I just need to get out of the shower. I need to, I walked downstairs, I called my family being like, when's anyone getting home? Like, anyway, and I just kind of sat there in this state, and I kind of got myself into an unstable equilibrium where I was like, well, I'm panicking, but I'm still alive. So we're okay for now. And then I remember my family got home and we're all sitting on the couch. I didn't say a word to them. With almost all my anxiety, I would never tell anyone. As it was happening before or after, I wouldn't talk to anyone about it. And I was sitting there and we're all talking, and inside my head, I'm going, everything's okay. Just sit there, talk to them. Everything's okay. I'm still freaking out, this whole thing. mid-conversation, I just lie down on the couch and just close my eyes and go, if you sleep, it goes away, sort of thing. And this was mid-conversation with my family. And I think that was, and I knew at this point that it was anxiety, but that was the point where I went, it's not okay, because even talking to people, distracting you isn't enough, And I remember I did eventually open up the conversation, because I didn't want to tell people when it was happening, because I was like, what are they going to do? They're going to go, let's do this. Do you need to go to the hospital? Is everything okay? And that'll make it almost worse. But I remember telling my family, I did eventually sort of mention it to them and tell them, and they go, we knew that something wasn't quite right. You just haven't been yourself. Things, we just could tell that there was something. And I don't think they fully understood it at first, the impact of the anxiety and what it did to me and all this sort of stuff. But it was good to tell them, and they didn't then start treating me differently or doing anything differently, but it just meant that I knew I could talk if I needed to. Not that I couldn't before, but it's more like when you have to bring it up for the first time and explain yourself, it's kind of overwhelming. Whereas once they already knew, I can tell them, oh, it's been really good, or this has happened, or I found this helped, or this day was really bad, or, and they don't think, they don't blink at it, but, it doesn't become a huge, big issue. It becomes something that, oh, okay, anxiety, it's there. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. You can, do things to overcome it and fix it, and it doesn't have to be the death of you, if you know what I mean.
Thank you so much for going into that. On the opposite side of the scale, I mean, we've been really digging really deep, especially into the harder things that you've went through. So let's talk about the happy things that you've went through. So here's a question, right? Let's say there's a supervillain. The supervillain has the ability to take away the most beautiful, happy, amazing memory that you have. What would be that memory that you're like, no, don't take that away. That's my favorite one. Don't touch that.
I mean, I love my family and friends, so I would want to put any experience that is me with my family on the top of the list. And there are a few in there that, where I've gone away on holidays with my entire family, which have been beautiful, amazing memories. But to be honest, there's one moment that happened last year, and it's going to sound again, I'm trying not to get too deep in it, but it happened last year. Every year I go away at Easter, and I go away to it's this place near Byron Bay in Australia. And I go away with my parents, and they all go off to a music festival. And I sit in a little cottage, a separate little cottage on a farm. It's a macadamia farm, and I just hang out. It's always been like the holiday before the year gets hectic, and it's like time to relax. And I had been dealing with anxiety. This is last year. I'd been dealing with anxiety. And I remember the first 3 days I was there, my brain was just like, it was just killing me. Like and it wasn't even all the anxiety. It was me questioning myself as a person and just thinking I wasn't a good person and beating myself up over and over and over, about a mistake I'd made, or, I'd find a mistake that I'd made in the past and gone, why did you, you're a bad person for doing that, or, why did you make that mistake? You're so silly, rather than moving on from it, just fixating on it and just going over and over in my head. Anyway, I went out to this beach, and I went and sat down at the beach, and it was almost as if there was this moment where it's almost like my brain had gone over everything so many times, and it just kind of released it all, and it went, okay, we've thought about it 20 million times, and it comes up with the same response, and there's nothing we can do about it, so it's time to let go of it. And in that moment, I had this feeling of, do you know when you're in middle school or whatever, or high school, and you finished, I know your year break is a bit different. You have your year break, spring break or something. It's in the middle of the year, like June, July, whereas ours is December through February kind of time, because that's our summer. I remember at the end of the year, always, it would be last day of school, and you go, I have 2 months to do whatever I want. I don't have to do anything. I have no worries. I can do anything I want to do. I can hang out with friends. And it was just this amazing freedom, this feeling of freedom. And in that moment on the beach, it's like my mind had that exact same feeling from when I was a kid, of just like pure freedom. Like you live and you can be whatever you want. Like just because of what mistakes you've made or who you have been or what you've done, that doesn't mean anything. You can be whatever you're an adult now. Like you can literally, if you want to, you can actually change. Almost everything is somewhat in your control. And having that feeling of absolute freedom of, if I want, I can just sit here on the beach for the rest of my life, or just, I mean, I know in theory, practically it doesn't work like that. You can't just sit on a beach every day, but just having that overwhelming feeling of freedom was just like a moment that I always try and go back and tap into. That was a moment where the anxiety didn't exist, and to have that feeling is I always try and tap into it. And I'm so glad that I managed to feel that again, because now I know in the darkest of anxiety that I could have that. And it makes me realize that, you can come back from things like that.
As I kind of think back on my life, if I ever had that, of course I had that, like when you're in school and the summer season comes around.
Oh, it was so good, right?
So good. I think, I kind of have a combination of that feeling of the two things that you answered with. So you answered with family and you answered with, like that feeling that you get when it's summerish kind of a thing. So, but the feeling that I received kind of like is the most beautiful memory I have. There's kind of two of them. One was the day I married my wife and we started our family. You know what I mean? That was such a beautiful experience. And it sounds like it was like what you experienced on the beach. But then also when both of our children were born, holding our kids for the first time, like seeing them is like, this is a hybrid of us. Like this is.
Yeah. And that moment is like, I haven't experienced it myself, but like would be incredible.
It's
like
unreal.
I know that some people, I know in like modern day, there are so many distractions and like society, I think in my head is sort of like taking a kind of a strange turn, but going back to the pure part of it, I think that's such an amazing moment to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Which beckons the question, do you want to have a family one day?
Yeah. I'm always very open-minded about the future. And I think that's the way I've managed to develop the way I have. I didn't have a strong, direction in mind. I know in terms of like as an artist, you have a bit of a stronger line for where you want to go. But if I had have, put boundaries on where I was going to be, I wouldn't be here. So I'm glad that I didn't. But I would definitely love to have a family of my own, and definitely won't rule it out. But in saying that, I'm not in any rush.
Yeah. No,
I don't have to have it at a certain time. I don't think it has to be here, there, anywhere. I think at the moment I'm probably career-wise too selfish to be able to bring up children in this sort of environment, but I would love to.
No, I had a very similar conversation. Me and my wife had a very similar conversation with, do you know Bonnie and Clyde? Cool. They came to Utah and we took them out to dinner, and because my wife was pregnant with our second kid at the time. And so we told them like, yeah, like, we're having another kid. They're like, how are you, like, you're going to Icon? Like, what? Like, how do you do this? How do you kids? The reason why I bring this up is because I want you to know that when that time comes that you decide to be a mother or to start a family or what have you, it's not going to, if you don't want it to, it's not going to detract from your career. And here's why. It's a very, 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 very big misnomer that when you have kids and when you get married, things have to come to a halting stop. And that's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, if you marry the right person and you have the right mindset with kids, things will catch fire with your career when those things happen. Because if you think about it like this, when someone wants to prepare for a marathon, they don't go running in perfect weather. They go up in the mountains where it's cold, or they go in like crazy hot weather, so that when the time comes for their race, they're ready for anything. It's the exact same with having a family or having kids or what have you. Because I can promise you now that I have 2 kids and a wife, I'm a freaking hard worker. I get things done when things need to get done now because I know I have to.
Yeah, I know exactly what it's like. If you want something done, give it to a busy person, which is definitely like how I've always been.
Yeah, exactly.
Keeping busy means that I get things done.
Exactly.
100%.
But I want you to know when that time comes, don't be afraid.
I like the way that my parents are still together, and I love them to bits. I say I live with them. I live in our family home, but they're not around very often. They have a business that's interstate and international, so they're constantly moving around. But we still have a family dog, so I kind of have to be the one. I have to stay here pretty much. They're still together. They're still very much happy, very much in love. And I do, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but I do love the way that they brought myself and my sister up. And it was very much like we are so loved by them, but their world didn't stop for us.
That's awesome.
Their world continued on, and we obviously became a part of their world, but they didn't lose everything they had, or they didn't give up or put on hold everything they had for us. Because when that happens, your life does become so much just about the kids that when the kids are grown up and gone, how do you have a life again? And not that you can't, you obviously can, but it is a lot harder when you're meant, to shift a mentality in such a dramatic way. And I think, same thing with me. If, when I do start a family and have kids, I will love them endlessly and do everything to make them happy and for them to grow up, in an amazing world. But in saying that, it doesn't mean that I need to give anything up or my life has to stop or anything like that. They will be a part of my life. They won't be my life and nothing else, because as soon as they grow up like I did and move out and have their own ambitions, I need to survive as well.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know what I mean?
I think this kind of ties into what we were talking about at the very beginning, when you were kind of hyper focused on yourself, right? When you were hyper focused on yourself, that's when things kind of like got weird. I think it's the same with kids. You still have to have a life. If you're hyper focused on your kids, it's not good.
Definitely not.
Anyways, I got one final question for you, and then I'm going to go hang out with my family. Let's say that you were able to sit down with a higher power and you were able to ask this higher power a question. What would be the one question that you would ask them? I
really think, to be honest, that the only question would be what happens after death, really. And I know that people get in that situation and go like, why does children's cancer exist and things like that? But I think there's so many things like that in my mind make sense. Like, I remember when I was a young kid, I don't know whether I watched a documentary or a video or something, and something that really struck with me is for something to exist, you almost need the opposite. So you can't have good unless there's bad, because you don't really, it would just be neutral. There would be no good because that's just normal life. And they're the same with, or like, say for example, good versus evil, you know what I mean? Or healthy versus unhealthy. If everyone was always healthy, it wouldn't be called healthy, really. It would all just be a neutral state of living. And so I think, I've heard a question similar to that asked before, where people go, I'm going to ask, they would ask something like, why do unjust things happen to good people? And as much as I hate when things like that happen, it almost needs to. I hate that it needs to, but it sort of, it gives people a lease on life. It also shows people to enjoy what they have while it's there, and also that it shows you the opposite. It shows you the bad that can happen, so you appreciate the good. The one thing I would definitely ask is, what does happen to us after we die?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Sippy, did you have a good time?
I had a great time. I'm very deep in thought now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this. Do you have any final words?
I just want to say hey to everyone, and I'm out here and I'm doing my thing and working hard.
Is there anything that you want to push or anything? Like, is there any songs coming out, or is there anything that you want to say, hey, go check this out?
Yeah, so pretty much I've sort of haven't been releasing as much in the past couple of months, just so I can actually sit and just write. So I've been writing. I've had a lot of big, awesome remix opportunities, which have been cool, that I can't really say yet, but people will sort of be hearing those soon. I've got a couple of originals that a couple of them are already done. Some of them are waiting on some other stuff. Just last night, actually, I was part of a campaign with Nike Football. We did a big launch for the Socceroos, which are our Australian football team, for their kit that Nike have been doing. So I've been working a lot with Nike and with Nike Football. We've just done some really exciting things together, and that's really awesome. So yeah, really, I don't have any releases coming up in the short term. I'm playing some really awesome gigs over here in Australia, and I'm hoping soon to push over in the States. I would really just love to get over there, because I know that my fan base is majority based in the States. So I would really love to get over there within the next year, which I'm hoping should be doable. But yeah, release wise, it'll be in the next 3 months. I'll start to push everything out, and it'll be full steam ahead from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for talking to me for all that time.
Absolutely. You have fun with those spiders. I'll have fun with my spiders. I'm going to go hang out with my wife now.
Thank you very much. It was so awesome to talk to you.